Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to help you get the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you. Well, today I'm dealing with a question. What do you do with quotes? How do you handle them in your Zettelkasten? How do you file them? How do you keep them? What do you do when you come upon a quote that you really like? So I have one that I need to file, and I thought I would go through the entire process with you so I can show you from start to finish how I would take care of a quote, because they're so worthy. If you have a quote that is really something that you want to remember, then it is worthy of a spot in your Zettelkasten. So let's go see. I'll share with you how I do it, and if you have other ways of handling it, you can leave it in the comments so we can compare. Thank you. See you over in the down-facing camera. Okay, here's the quote in question. It's from Vanessa Sperling, and it's a Zettelkasten is not a parking lot. It's a vehicle. I really related to that quote and loved it so much that I immediately jotted it down, and now it's time for me to give it a home within my Zettelkasten. So I'll show you how I handle quotes, no matter who they're from. The first thing I do with a quote is I like to put it on a bib card that is specifically for quotes. If I have bib cards for an author for various books or videos, and I'm also collecting quotes, I use a separate bib card for the quotes. And I'll show you what that looks like. I don't have an author card going for Vanessa, so that's my starting point to make an author card. So she gets an author card. On my author cards, I do first name, last name, but I underline what it's going to be alphabetized by so that my eye goes to that directly. And now I want to create a reference for the bib card for quotes that I'm about to create. And this is how I name my quotes. This is my bib card number for quotes, just the author's initials, underscore, and Q for quote. Now I'm ready to make my bib card. Now, by the way, if when I looked up Vanessa Sperling already had a quote card going, I would simply pull the bib card and add to it. But I don't have one going, so I'm going to start one. So now I have my bib card front with its required fields. I've got the bib card number, the title, the author, and my purpose. And I'm leaving some space here in case I add a picture of Vanessa. I'm kind of liking the idea of adding pictures to my bib cards of late, so I'm going to leave space for that. And now I'm ready to log the quote. So now on the back of the card, I indicate where it came from, and I've got the quote written in blue, which is my indication that it is an exact quote, and so I don't need punctuation for it. That's what the blue tells me. If I had the foresight to have written down the date, I would include it here as well, but all I have on my card is the quote. If I come upon a good quote from someone from whom I already have a bib card started, then I will usually just add it to the bib card. That might well happen first before I create the main card, but in this case I jotted it down on a main card. So now it's up to me to finish out the rest of the pieces of this main card. This is just the content from the author, and now I need to supply my reaction, source, and tagline. So now I have my reaction. Categories encourage parking cards in their proper spaces. Joining interesting conversations moves the concept along. Now I'm going to add the source, which is just the Vanessa Sperling quote card, and it's the first card. I don't know how many I will ultimately have, but right now I have one. So now I need the tagline that's going to bring this whole card back to memory. And so this is the tagline I ended up using. A Zettelkasten is a vehicle that moves thoughts, not parks them. So next I need to identify the keywords that I want to index in this quote. And this is another opportunity to spend a little bit of time talking about what makes a good keyword to underline. If we underline too many words, then the indexing process becomes burdensome. If we underline too few, then we don't cement the card in memory, and it's hard for that card to have future associations. So we want to strike a balance and have enough index touch points and not useless terms that it will never really join on. Well, I felt that I really needed a Zettelkasten. A vehicle is a huge part of the quote, and I wanted parks too to help bring the whole thing about it not being a parking lot. But the piece that I added to it, that I want to capture the whole card, I want to include the fact that it moves thoughts, because that's the component that I added with my reaction to Vanessa's quote. So my tagline is, a Zettelkasten is a vehicle that moves thoughts, not parks them. And so now I'm ready to figure out, based on the keywords in the tagline and, if necessary, other thoughts and ideas that come to me while I'm bringing this card into my system, to figure out, where does this card want to go? Okay, so here's my card and my index. And so one of the obvious things to look at is Zettelkasten, but I've got quite a number of cards for that. I will almost certainly have to check that out. But I also would like to think about using vehicle, moves, and thoughts. I'm almost certain I don't have any parks, and I kind of doubt if I have vehicle, but the letter V isn't very large, so it's not costly to check that one out. Well, not surprisingly, I have no card for vehicle, so let me check out my letter V's. No vehicle there. It was worth a try. Okay, how about thoughts? My T's are really thick. They're about to need breaking up, like my letter S's and P's and C's. I don't have a card for thought, but I do for think. I'll glance at that. And there's actually one that's Zettelkasten related, thinking with source through your response and tagline. Now that's kind of interesting. It's sufficiently close to where we're going with this card that I think I'm going to jot that one down on the back of my card. So I just took my card, my main card, and on the back of it, I jotted that reference down as being one that I want to check out. So with the less obvious ones looked at, my next thing would be to do, in the less obvious areas, I still have to look up thought in my letter T cards, and there's a bundle of those. I've got no fewer than 8 letter T cards, and I'll search through for anything interesting on the word thought. Okay, and here's an interesting one. Second brain, focus or energy, your thoughts onto main cards. Now that is definitely a Zettelkasten reference, so I'm going to add that one to the back of this card. So now I've captured that as a good card to look up as a possible parent. And that's all that I came up with the general letter T. So I want to check out moves to see if there's something interesting there. Got a fair number of M's as well. Move isn't a card of its own, so I'll have to look at the 9 letter M cards. Here's one that's tantalizing. This purple bracket tells me that it's one of those category cards, and it doesn't have a real tagline, it's just a title, The Clarity That Moves Us On. Now, it's interesting enough that I'm going to pick it up. The reason why I'm being careful to include some of these now is that I'm gradually converting them to foundation cards instead of these just title cards that don't link well. And so that means when I see one that looks like a possible parent for my new card, I'm picking them up, even if it's a little bit of a stretch. So I'm going to note this one. Here's another title in the place of a tagline: Progress, Movement, Stage Review. I'm going to let this go because I only expand ever like one a day of those title cards, and this one looks like a less of a likely match. Okay, nothing else came out promising from the general letter M's, so now it's time to take a look at the Zettelkasten cards. Okay, I've got 3 cards with references to the Zettelkasten. And so I'm going to be comparing the remark that this card makes with the remark that various others of these cards make to see which ones create an interesting conversation. Now, what I notice immediately, this entire first page is all just title references. So there's not going to be any good conversation starting here. But I must look through these because there might be something that at least looks like it's worthy of pursuing. And you have so little to go on with these title cards that I'm going to read them carefully. Nothing on that first page. And look at this second page is still more than half are those titles with directory cards. Pardon me, are those titles with just placeholder categories. Okay, now finally this third one only has one of those. These are all ones that look like they might actually at least have the possibility of starting a conversation. So now I can actually compare the two taglines and see if I have an interesting conversation going on here. Okay, and I did find one that's worthy of taking another look at. It's a pretty long number. It's deep in the system. But it's that the joy of a Zettelkasten is the pop off the page moment of insight. And that's certainly a type of movement, of thought movement. And it also fits with the Vanessa's point of it being a vehicle, because in this case it would be a vehicle of understanding. So I'm going to jot down that long number as well. Okay, so I've got 4 cards that are potential parents for my new card. So I'm going to tuck away the index and start pulling cards to check them out. So let's start with that ultra long card number. I didn't write down the tagline of the card. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. So now I'm just going to look for this card and see where we are. Okay, here it is. Part of the joy of a Zettelkasten is the pop off the page moment of insight. And it is already a part of a pretty interesting conversation, every one of which is a link elsewhere in the Zettelkasten. Rather interestingly, it makes me want to compare some of these other numbers. But no, this card goes off in different directions and doesn't pick up on any of these. Let's see what we're now getting in a conversation. Let's see if this new quote adds to this conversation in a way that makes sense. So a Zettelkasten is a vehicle that moves thoughts, not parks them. The emotional moment of understanding. Just a title. A new insight deserves its own main card. Well, that kind of fits because after all, this is an insight that is on the main card. This actually looks interesting. And that our Zettelkasten cards are building blocks for novel thoughts is also pretty interesting. So this would not be a bad card to add to this conversation. So I'm going to mark that one and look at some of the others that I marked to pull, because this one looks like it will either be the parent or will at least be a link. So I checked that one off and I'm going to set the cards aside. Now there's another one that's in this same box, so I'll pull that. Okay, now this card has a child card, but not a directory. So this is the only child of this card. So let's take a look at the conversation they've got going here. Second brain, focus or energy, your thoughts onto main cards. If your ideas are not on the cards, how can it possibly be your second brain? That's a Julianne quote. Interesting. And that's the long-term goal. There's also the short term to think about. And for the short term, the rewards are focus and energy. And it has a child card that says, saying it's all Greek to me is a cop-out. And that one goes back to the Mortimer Adler book, when he was saying that if every word in a book you were reading was entirely in a language strange to you, as in the case of a book in a totally foreign language, you could make no progress at all, because he's talking about getting the meaning out of context. And then he goes on to say that people are just looking for a good excuse when they say it's all Greek to me. And then I made a note that a lot of the work is actually taking place by your associative brain, and that in the fact that in Adler, you make multiple passes through the book, you give your associative brain an awful lot to work with. So that's a rather interesting conversation. And it does seem that this card would be a worthy addition to this conversation as well. Okay, so I'm going to put a green check on this one and set it aside. I'm going to keep its child card with it too, because if it does choose this for its parent, it needs to know that there's already a child. I've pulled another drawer to go look at this one, which is that It's just a category card to see if this really actually might be ready to be expanded into a true foundation card, and if the conversation in this area makes sense for our new card. Okay, and here's that category card. It's a divider, and it just says the clarity that moves us on. And so I'm going to have to look at the cards in that section to see where we might be going. You see, this at a minimum, this needs a directory for all of the stuff that comes under it. Okay, very interesting stuff here, but not really related to the quote from Vanessa. So I'm going to rule this one out. Not this one. So I've only got one more to pull, which is, of course, in another drawer. Okay, we're looking for 1M2C-1. Okay, this card is a little bit all over the place. I took it during a Right to Freedom meeting. The person speaking was Robert Atherton. He's doing a book on aids to thinking and mental reasoning. He's quite a powerhouse individual, extremely brilliant, and I can't wait for his book to come out. I'm really looking forward to it. So I jotted a few things down, and he was talking about the connections between reflective thoughts, writing, and the need for cognitive scaffolding. Well, in my view, that's what my Zettelkasten is my cognitive scaffolding, but I'm really eager to find out what he means by that. And he's thinking about thinking by means of the act of writing. And he said, many great minds have said that I cannot think without writing. I have a little bit of that. I don't know if that makes me a great mind. I don't think it goes both ways. So he talks about you are thereby building reflective thoughts which are made possible by a cognitive scaffolds. Very interesting. So I was making the note that when you're keeping a Zettelkasten, when you write your response on the card, you're also thinking reflectively. If it goes on too long, you can just grab the yellow legal pad and keep on writing. It doesn't have to necessarily fit on a card. And apparently I did do some extra thinking because there's a reference to a yellow legal pad. I'm not going to dive into it here. This would be a little bit of a stretch. I can certainly see the relatedness of these two cards, but I think I have two cards already that make better parent choices. This one says, fun, that's fun. But it's not my mom, not my dad. This one's just going to get put back. So now it's time for the Vanessa Sperling quote to make its choice. Which conversation does it want to join? There's this very lively conversation here, which is going on, but it mostly through links, but it's a very interesting conversation, very much about the aha moment, the moment of understanding, and how building blocks help us form novel thoughts, which really does to me seem to be a lot about moving thoughts along. And that fits with the idea of a Zettelkasten being a vehicle and not just a parking lot for stuff. So that looks very promising. Now let's take a look at the other choice. The other choice is this conversation where this parent already has one child. And so if this card joined it, we'd have this conversation going on. So this is talking about your second brain, focus or energy, getting your thoughts onto main cards. And this one's basically saying that, you got to put your brain into it. You don't just say it's all Greek to me and let it go at that. This is interesting. This guy's heart is really with this conversation. This is really getting very interesting about how thoughts are moving. And so now we've settled on it. Other than all of these links, this card does not actually have a child card of its own. So this will be 3B2A, 3B4A, 2A1A will be its number. It'll get added to this directory card here. And I think I'm going to pass on providing a link here because it just really wasn't that close of a match. So I'm just going to put these back, give it the next number, add it to this directory card, and index it. So I hope you enjoyed thinking alongside me as I dealt with this quote. And I want to review for you very quickly what I do with a quote. First of all, the quote is going to go on a bib card for quotes. If I don't already have a bib card for quotes, I'll add it to that author's card, give it the author's initials _Q for quotes. And now on the bib card itself, I put a full copy of the quote. in that respect, the bib cards that I create for any author for quotes will have a growing collection of all of the interesting quotes from that one author. So they'll all be in one place. That can be really handy right there. And then other than that, I treat the quote itself like any main card. It gets my reaction, it gets the source, and a tagline. I file it like I would any main card, index it, and I'm delighted to have the quote as part of my Zettelkasten. I hope this helps. Thank you. Bye-bye.